So, a long time ago, I read My Broken Mariko. The story itself was a straightforward drama about losing a loved one. Tomoyo's best friend Mariko dies. Tomoyo goes on a journey of self discovery and goes through the classic 5 stages of grief. At the time, I liked it well enough. It was well executed, but nothing mind blowing. But as time went on, I found myself thinking about it more and more, and whenever that happens, it usually means that there's something interesting there that I'm also not fully understanding. So after a couple months, I went back and read it again, this time paying attention to what it was doing, and what I noticed was that it was really effective at making me feel empathy for Tomoyo and Mariko, despite being super short. I'm talking like 150 pages long. That's not even like an average volume of a manga. Now, that in and of itself isn't too strange. Like, I could just say that it's because the author got the pacing, writing, and expressions right, and so all of that combined, obviously, the end product is going to be effective to a degree. But I felt like that wasn't all the author was doing, because, all this time had passed and I felt so familiar with Tomoyo and Mariko despite only having read it once. That's not something you achieve by just writing a competent manga. No, to me, what was really effective about My Broken Mariko was the way Mariko herself was portrayed and presented throughout the story. Stories about grief, stories about loss, stories about mourning, to me, they're tricky. It's one thing to have a death be the turning point for a character in a story, whether it be their stepping stone triggered to their downfall or simply a point of self-reflection. It's easy to make a death count when there's a bigger point to be made. If everything is executed correctly, those deaths usually click to some degree. They're easy to slot into the story. But stories that are about grief and loss are different because you're building the story around this death. You could have the person die pretty far into the story, so the reader has time to be endeared to them, or you could have the story be about their upcoming death and have the story be about accepting it, or you could have it be the catalyst at the very beginning and have it simmering in the background till the end. The thing with all of these, though, is that they usually need time to be effective. There's certainly not strategies you could execute properly in a manga that is only 150 pages long. And Mariko does die literally in the first page of the manga. So, how does the author make it work? How does the author make us empathize in such a short time span? Well, let me ask you a question. Can death be used as a narrative tool? Well, the answer is a very obvious yes. So then let me ask you something else. Can death be used as a narrative tool for the character that has died? Meaning the death of this character, the catalyst that makes the character physically leave the story, also serve to tell the story of that character. Yes? No? Maybe? Well, that's what My Broken Mariko does. So, let's just run down the manga real quick. Quick summary. Right from the get-go, there's that kind of camera-like framing that invokes the sense of this being kind of like a small-budget indie movie. Tomoyo's expressions are over-exaggerated, and there's just a lot of energy to everything she does. But then, of course, all of that is contrasted by moments of melancholy and grief, of calmness, and a blending of reality and memories as Tomoyo reminisces on Mariko and the bond she had with her. A push and pull created through the grief that Mariko's death has caused, an unsureness on how to proceed. That pain and grief is exerted when Tomoyo does crazy, wacky stuff like punch Mariko's abusive rapist piece of shit dad in the face, or, chase down a robber in a motorcycle. She goes on a journey and works through her grief while having a bunch of flashbacks about Mariko, like a bunch of flashbacks. Like half of the story are flashbacks about Mariko. And then, of course, at the end, she accepts the death of her loved friend. All standard fare for a short one-volume drama, except, of course, it isn't all standard fare. So when I first tried writing about Mariko, right, the way I framed things was that the way the author paneled stuff was interesting, because she'll have these flashbacks of Mariko and very slightly blend them in with present-day Tomoyo through the paneling, which was representative, to me, at the time, of how those memories to her were still Mariko, an attempt to feel someone who was no longer there. What do I mean by blending the past and present? Well, exactly what it entails, whether it be Tomoyo replying to a Mariko that isn't there, or a panel setup that makes it seem like Mariko is smiling at her friend, or a panel structure that gives us the impression they're talking to each other. Basically, the author literally mixes in the flashback panels with the present in order to give us the feeling that it's all occurring now, that all of this matters now, at least in spirit. And this imagery does escalate more and more until eventually we get this very sad frame of Tomoyo literally cradling Mariko in her arms like a small child. At the time, I thought it was just an effective way to make me empathize, right? But I did find it odd that it was trying to make me empathize much more with Mariko than with Tomoyo. Like, Mariko's past was the main focus of the narrative, despite the story seemingly being about Tomoyo dealing with the loss. I mean, I did feel bad for Tomoyo, but man, Mariko's story, it was just so brutal, man. It was just tragic in a pretty realistic way, too. So, like, okay, what is effective about My Broken Mariko? Well, the mangaka presents the flashbacks in a creative way, blending them in with the panels of current Tomoyo in order to make the scenes more vivid, in order to make it feel like Mariko's still there. Got it? Okay. Alright. Another video. No. Of course not. No, it didn't click. It didn't make sense. Yes, that was part of it. Yes, the author was definitely blending in the flashbacks with the present, but it wasn't just to make stuff emotional. No, there was something else, something more to it. And that's when it hit me. Tomoyo, she's the narrative device. The protagonist is still her, kinda. But the protagonist is also Mariko. Tomoyo deals with her grief, deals with her loss by reminiscing about Mariko, but that's not enough. No, I mean, Tomoyo loved her a lot, so there needs to be something else. She wants Mariko to be remembered. To her, those memories are the most important thing she has. So who else can she pass that on to but us? And yeah, I know that sounds cheesy, and if you want to frame it in a least cheesy way, you totally can. You can just say Mariko's the protagonist because, I don't know, she's given the most importance in the story or something. But to me, it really is Tomoyo passing on the story of her friend to us. I mean, the title, right? It has Mariko's name right there, and it's very clear Tomoyo is the one saying, this is the story about her broken Mariko, right? Additionally, like I mentioned before, there is a non-stop blend of the past and present through the paneling, and within the first pages, there's even this moment right here, when Tomoyo goes to steal Mariko's ashes from her rapist, abusive piece of shit dad, and quite literally is the outlet for Mariko's anger and sadness. Throughout the story, we are presented with Tomoyo's memories of Mariko, and whenever we do, we always get a juxtaposition of those memories with the present day. And yeah, it makes for some smooth transitions, but it also helps us feel like we are there, in the moment. Like Mariko herself is relaying all of this to us, despite them just being Tomoyo's memories. This is why I say she's the framing device. As she deals with her loss, she goes through the memories of her friend and shows us all the things she suffered through. Effective at making us empathize, yes, but also, you gotta remember how this story started, with Tomoyo abruptly finding out Mariko was dead. She had no idea, and while she works through the shock, she walks us through the path that led to her friend's end. This is important. Tomoyo knows all of this stuff. Tomoyo was with her for years. She knows why this ending came to be. She knows about the abuse and the suicidal thoughts and the trauma, but she relays it to us because we started the story with Mariko's end. We were introduced to Mariko through a TV screen at some pub. So Tomoyo is doing us the favor of taking us through that path, through Mariko's path, because she's no longer able to do so. Of course, Tomoyo has her own story, and she's very likable in it, but the author makes it very clear Mariko is also a protagonist. I mean, look at this panel right here. She literally drew a speech bubble over Mariko's ashes. I realize my point might be a little abstract, maybe, so I don't know if those help, but let's frame it like this. The story, Tomoyo's journey, is basically couples counseling for both her and Mariko. She can't accept the fact her best friend is dead, and she wants to work through those emotions. But her friend is dead, so how can she work things out with her? Well, through the way the author tells the story, through the past and present blending, through us being witness to Tomoyo's memories of Mariko. It's not like a revolutionary way to tell a story, but it's super impressive because, like I said, this manga is really short. So short the author includes an extra story at the end because there just weren't enough pages. In a manga this short, there's little room for atonement or reminiscence or even complete acceptance. There's little room for new beginnings and revelations on the meaning of life or even for the next step to be taken. In these 150 pages, what is there room to say? Well, what the author chooses to do is show us their relationship. What better way to make us appreciate both of them than through their bond? A bond that quite literally is transcending time, interactions that reach over through the paneling, a connection that forms through the way the author shows us Mariko and Tomoyo talking. Mariko isn't there anymore, but she's also the protagonist because Tomoyo wants her to be the protagonist. They were all they had for each other, and now that she's gone, who is there to show that relationship to? Who is there that would care about the relationship, but the people that are actively engaging with their story? Sure, it maybe could have just worked by just having the flashbacks, but there's no denying the way the past and present overlap is a really effective way to understand the feelings of someone who quite literally is no longer here to relay those feelings to us. And look, I am not going to psychoanalyze the author or read into their intentions too much, but let me read you a quick excerpt from an interview they did. As far as the topics of suicide and abuse, I think the most fundamental inspiration came from my mother, who is an abuse survivor herself. She sometimes told me about her experiences with the physical and emotional abuse she was subjected to by both of her parents. Her experience with abuse had an immeasurably large effect on her entire life. As I was caught up in the storm that she carried within her, I witnessed the resulting rough patches, turmoil, and hardships up close while she raised me. Throughout my life, I wondered how I could ever dispel the outrage, sadness, and helplessness I often felt when my mother told me about her experiences. If only I could have been her mother instead. I wish I could have at least been her friend when she was a kid. Why can't I do anything about her past? Who should I direct my hatred towards about this, and how? And so, I ended up having the protagonist of the story act out just a few of those thoughts and feelings in my place. So yeah, Tomoyo is quite literally the spokesperson for Mariko, the outlet, the narrator of her story. Yes, she does work through her feelings throughout the manga, but she's there because she wants her friend to be remembered. She wants someone she can relay all of these moments of vulnerability her friend had, so they can know that struggle, so they can understand what led her down the path she chose. And what bigger proof is there but the ending, in which Tomoyo reads the suicide letter, the last letter her friend left her, and we don't even get a small glimpse at what it says. Here, at the end of the story, Tomoyo willingly chooses to not share this last moment of intimacy between them with us. So yeah, real cool stuff. I'm sure lots of stories have done this, but My Broken Mariko is good and I wanted to talk about it. So yeah, I have an appreciation for succinct stories that manage to do what they set out to flawlessly, and I think My Broken Mariko is that. I recommend it. Awesome art and a good message. Well, that's it. Later.